What's up, guys? Kind of my typical rambles, but had a nice, enjoyable, it's just a short little conversation this morning with a friend of mine's mom and son. Love that family. Her mom is very much like my mom, in a sense, like she's like adoptive mom. But we're talking about alternative energies and that type of stuff. I know I've done a couple videos on alternative energy and sustainability, that type of stuff. What I love about these types of conversations, because it gets your brain cooking and going a little bit, get you thinking. Because I recognize that with alternative energy, well, like I was explaining on there, and I've explained before, solar, wind, water, anything of that nature, even geothermal, the efficiency rate, the average efficiency is at that 20-25% range. You might find some a little higher, but it's not in a production that you can afford it. But the two biggest issues with alternative energy is our current systems that we have are not efficient enough to produce the max amount of a power output that it could. We still have to advance on that. And then on the same note, we don't have the technology. We have the technology to a degree, but we don't have, at the moment, because I'll say, the only ones that are really close enough to it would be like the Tesla batteries and the power core systems for homes and all that people use in combination with their off-grid systems, whether solar, wind, or a combination, which personally I recommend that if you're one of those people, you want to go off-grid and you want to be able to be at least self-sufficient, because your systems are only always will be until our technologies advance more in this particular area of power production. It's always going to produce at that 25% until it gets better, But the other area is our battery storage, the power storage. Because, like I said in one video, Texas, all those people that went without power, when you use an alternative energy, whether it be standalone solar, standalone hydro, a combination of those things, geothermal, you want a combination. But you also want a power bank, because if something happens to that system, whether there's not enough sun hitting the solar, or you have a fault, something fail with the geothermal aspect, because you have to keep a constant type maintenance to it. And geothermal does work with a form of steam also. They all will have times where they fail or cannot produce efficiently enough to be needed. Therefore, you need a power system or a power bank as a backup to help recover the energy loss that's not being produced until it's being produced more. You're not going to have sunlight 24 hours. You're not going to have wind at 30 miles an hour non-stop 24 hours a day. It's not going to happen. Water. You'll have issues depending on where you're at of freeze-ups. Things rust. Things fall apart. If you have a season where the water's low and it's a drought season and there's not enough water flow, it's not going to produce the constant water flow. Let's say upstream or river from where that's at, something could happen where the river starts cutting ground and changes direction. It can change that flow of water and the speed of that water. That's kind of how Mother Nature works on that aspect, on all of this. But to try and cut some of this short or whatever and skip past a lot of it, you know, I covered a lot of my thoughts on where, you know, switching from fossil fuel to alternative energies right now. You know, I've covered that in a previous video, which is basically named that. It's about alternative energies and fossil fuels, you know, and the politics of some of it too. Because I can tell you right now, on a government standpoint, the reason why they won't or have not implemented certain things is because they cannot tax you on free energy. They got to make their money. So if they're not making money, they're not going to utilize it. They're going to utilize your beliefs to make money off you, to feed you some shit maybe, but they're not going to take that money and use it on what you want. They're going to use it on what they want, and then they'll convince you that you want it too. But it's just a sidetrack there. But I got to, you know, kind of thinking about things, because as we were, you know, kind of loosely conversing things, because they're talking about, you know, even brought up on vehicles and all this stuff. And a couple of points I'm going to make so that others understand. And you sit down and you do some homework. And you can go look on a Home Depot site, Lowe's, you know, or even just in general, just whether you use Google or DuckDuckGo or anything like that. It's not hard to look it up. And look up how much power it takes to power an electric instant water heater. I mean, the average water heater, like I've said before, takes about 5 kilowatts of power. My entire off-grid system produces that. So I'd be only producing energy just for my water heater. That's why we had to tear that out and switch it out for something else, because the power is not efficient enough. And so, you know, that's a 12-panel system, and that takes up half my roof. I can expand, which we're kind of getting to a point where we're almost ready to sell this place at this point. I'm pretty well getting there. But when you start looking at like the instant water heaters, a lot of those will require 15 kilowatts alone, and can go all the way up to, I believe, 60 or 70 kilowatts is the highest I've seen them get to, I believe. And then people want to move to electric cars. An electric car, when you look up the charge ports for those to put on your house, you're looking at between 30 and 60 kilowatts also. So just between those two things, you're looking at, if let's say you go old school water heater, you know, 5 to 8 kilowatts of power on top of that, let's say that minimum of 30 kilowatts to charge that car, you're still looking at right about 40 kilowatts of power needed just for your water heater and car. You still need a minimum of at least 7.5 to 10 more kilowatts to be able to power the rest of your home. And that's not counting to have the excess power needed to charge the systems in case there's a bad day and your system fails and you need that power to keep your home going while you get it fixed, or until there's more sunlight, or whatever the situation. You know, and I've talked about, for things to be, you know, if we were to try and do away with these different power plants and stuff like that, the only way to be able to replace them is if, as a collective, let's say just in the U.S. alone, the entire population, their houses, their apartment buildings, because an apartment building cannot have enough solar or wind on that property to power every apartment, because each apartment's running at about 15 kilowatts in an apartment. And when you're looking at some places with 150 units, hell, even 100 units, to do the math easy, you're looking at what, 150,000 kilowatts? That's a shit ton of solar panels and windmills just for that one building, and not counting their electric cars. But you know, this is why when I talk about some of this stuff, you know, some folks gotta, You know, they're like, they think too much with their emotions, and they're not using logic, because a lot of times they're trying to fix one problem, not realizing they might actually add to another problem or create a new one. You know, and you start going hydro, well, we already have a problem where a majority of the world's drinking water is polluted and bad. So let's add to that problem. When it comes to, you know, complaining about cows somewhere, you know, destroying the environment because they take up all this land. Like I just showed you, it takes 12 panels for 5 kilowatts. If it took 12 panels to, say, do even 10 kilowatts, that would be great. But you got to do the math at that point. You got 12 at 5. You're looking at 60 panels at 30. And that's just to, at minimum, charge your car if it comes to the electric car, you know, situation I was talking about. You know, you got, well, there's your car. So you've got 60 panels. You know, if you do wind, you might have, because you got to run them in sections of 12 panels. So you might have 48 panels, and then you might have 3 or 4 windmills. And now you have to hope that those wind generators and the solar is going to produce enough power at all times to make sure that your car's charged to get to work in that on that morning before Christmas or whatever, because you're trying to work overtime to cover for, you know, your bills and pay for Christmas presents, because, you know, you had to screw those bills off to pay for Christmas presents. See, your biggest, for living off grid, your biggest struggle or hurdle to deal with is not summer, it's not spring, hell, it's not even fall, it's winter. Because during the winter time, you're not producing the sunlight you need. So you have to have twice the power. You have to have twice the power output at that point to make sure that you're producing more than enough power to keep your home going, charging those systems. And if you got that electric car you want, to charge that car. So you're looking at minimum 120 panels, or in combination, let's say 96 panels, and you've got 10 windmills, wind generators. You're starting at that point. Think about what you're having to do to your property to do that, because your house isn't going to hold all that unless you've got a mansion and sitting on 50 acres of land. Then you've got the room to do it. So these types of things would become reserved more for the rich, in essence, or even people who are, you know, just simple farmers. They'd have the space, but I don't think they would necessarily have the money to do that, because most struggle to have the money to keep their farms going these days. And that's a whole different story, because people think farming's a problem, yet farming's at 15%, roughly around 15% of our farming industry is about 15% of what it was around 60 plus years ago. And of that 15%, a good 80% of those people, right in that range, are all above the age of 50. You're looking at about maybe 5% out of that 15% population of that farming industry being under that age, that is to take on that role that we lost in that 95% over the last few decades. So these are things to think about. There's a reason why we're no longer the world's breadbasket. We're not a leader in anything, really. We're a leader in being a bunch of fat bitches, basically. And I'm talking all of us, you know, because we're an overweight country and we're over-emotional. And this isn't to shame anybody or anything like that. I'm no fucking Prince Charming. But no, I got to thinking about these things a little bit, you know, because you know, how could you actually be able to switch out? And even when they're bringing up vehicles, being able to create a vehicle that isn't having to rely on fossil fuel, but you're still going to have to rely on fossil fuel for power production. Just because you remove all the cars and you put up more power plants that are using fossil fuels, you're not ending the problem that cars have created. You're actually creating another problem, because now you've got, instead of 1,000 cars producing, you know, this type of exhaust, you've got these giant power plants that are producing off all this fucking exhaust and smoke. That's got to go somewhere, and it all can't be filtered out. And even if it's to just, whether it's to heat water or to reuse the heat from that exhaust, those chemicals, all that burn off cannot be 100% filtered out. It's still going into the environment. So I continued to think about it, and it's like, you know, and it was kind of a suggestion for a friend of mine, you know, boy, to consider, because I mean, it just helping him expand on a little bit of what he's doing, because he's a damn smart kid. I'll say that much. You know, what I've conversed and got, you know, talking to him a little bit there, just in that short conversation. He's a very intelligent kid. You know, I got through the conversation because I call her mom too, but it's his grandma. She even brought up Cars Lake off of the Jetsons. And, you know, with these different things, it's like, and what was funny is it was before I even really read that comment about, you know, being able to have cars like off of the Jetsons. You know, that's obviously was kind of her, you know, kind of getting the thought processes going and all that stuff. I had already made a suggestion to him, you know, maybe look into magnetism, magnetics, magnetic engines and generators. They don't require a battery to operate. They don't require any fuel or technically electrical source. Now, if you wanted, you could still create, you know, because you've got, like, in junkyards and all that stuff, they've got these big machines that look almost like an excavator, but they've got a big magnet at the end that they can turn on and off with a switch. Now, that would fall into the double aspect of having a simple magnetic generator that is intended to be, in essence, a constant and only turned off when no longer in use, by removing the magnets from position so that they're no longer... Because you know how when you take two magnets and you try to put on the two magnets and you've got the north and south, they'll stick together, but then when you try to put, say, the two sides that are either north or south, is how south pole or north pole on them, positive pole, negative pole, however you want to put it, whatever. I'm not a super genius on this shit, obviously. But anyways, when you try to put a magnet together, and if you have the opposing sides, they attract. But when you have the two sides that are the same, they push apart. And that's what magnetic engines, magnetic generators, or superconductors in a lot of ways will utilize this, that energy produced between two magnets that are facing each other that have the same underlying poles. Kind of one of the most efficient, not necessarily the most efficient, but one of the coolest firearms or guns out there used on different naval ships is a rail gun, and that's purely using magnetics and magnetism. And you know, I kind of got to thinking about this a little bit. It's going to be a little ironic, but when she brought up the Jetsons thing and I saw that, I'm going, you know, some years back, I read an article where they're trying to create basically engines for flight using superconductors, magnetic superconductors. And I believe the theory actually stemmed from the ufology community on how UFOs flew and moved about, because they did, you know, from reports of the whole thing, they don't make sound, they don't do all that, they can move in any direction, and they move, frictionless movement is more efficient than, you know, say like if you're swimming in water, you can only go so fast because there's too much friction. Where if you're up on land, you can move faster than you can in water. It's that friction aspect of things, of what it creates, and that resistance. Well, in that community, they believe that in essence they use the type of, and you'll see it in some YouTube videos where they'll take two magnets and wire them together where they're facing each other, and they'll put it in this tube thing, you know, bounce up in the air type thing to keep it from, you know, going all over the place. Because sometimes they'll just, if you do it just right, they'll just kind of look like a jumping bean. But they'll put them in these harness-like things so it'll allow it to rise up and it'll levitate and look like it's just floating there. And it's because of the power of the magnetism that's creating that lift. Well, I was able to snatch up an article that I had read back in 2008, some years ago, about that, where they were scientists were and scientific inventors that I don't know if I want to call them science, and I don't know if I want to call them inventors, because they're right there. It's the same thing in this situation, because they're creating a new thing. They're inventing something new, basically, at the time. We're talking over a decade ago. But they were working on creating a superconductor engine for flight. See, something like this is what would be utilized for even in a vehicle similar to what you'd see on the Jetsons, so that people could fly around and do all that stuff. You know, so that type of thing started getting my noggin going. And then I realized, you know, whether you went geothermal, because that's still finite, because, I mean, when you start pumping, eventually it's going to be like oil over time. You can only basically suck the Earth's core of its heat for so long before it, yeah. You know, that's not an eternal thing. It's just like the sun, that's not eternal. You know, having sunlight 24 hours a day is not possible. Having wind 24 hours a day at a constant speed, nominal speed for wind generation, is not going to happen. Same thing with hydro and all these other things. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, wait a minute. You know, we're talking about magnetism and magnetic engines and superconductors, and I got to think about this. You know, it's magnetism at its basis that causes an entire planet to move and rotate. It's the magnetism of the sun that kind of helps create everything in there. It's not just the gravity. There's a magnetism in that. What's going on? They're interacting, basically. It's the Earth's magnetic fields and all this stuff that sustains the life on this planet. And this shit's strong. Is it going anywhere? No. It might shift polarities, as in flip, or it might alter a little bit, but does it go anywhere? No. Does it require a fuel source or a battery to get it going? No. What requires a battery is the power storage needed that a magnetic generator could actually produce. And yes, like any system, it doesn't matter what is built, it'll always require human maintenance to it. And if they want to go into get robots to do it, they could do it. I mean, it could be done. But you know how it is with any government. They need their money. So, yeah. We'd have to literally kick governments and corporations to the dirt, in essence, and I'm not saying that to inspire any type of overthrow. I'm just saying you'd have to remove the factors of the people that make human sustainability plausible into a money-making machine for themselves. You'd have to remove that. You know, something like that. You know, it could work. It could work. It's just they would have to, the people who control any system or body of people would have to be in the understanding that instead of having, let's say, that electric bill to power your home, you're paying a maintenance bill to keep the systems going. So they could still logically make money off of it, but I don't think they're really thinking about that right now. I don't think they really do. But I think one of our, you know, outside of the political aspects of things, I think our biggest issues when it comes to this is being able to create something that is in a small package. You know, let's say something that can fit in the trunk of your car or under the hood of your car, that can produce enough power to, say, power a city block. Let alone, we don't have the technology and power storage right now where, I mean, like I said earlier, the only person I can think of, the only company that's really doing it is getting there is Tesla with their power banks. Where I have 12 batteries, I would only need one of theirs to equivalent to 12 of mine. That would be fucking awesome. Elon, if you would love to donate one of your power banks to my house, that would be great. And I would do away with the batteries that I got right now. I'd have those recycled, or hell, donate them to whatever, for whatever cause, whatever. But yeah, no, that'd be great. But that's the only company I can think of off the top of my head right now that can produce a battery that isn't going to be like the size of your car to power 3 houses. We have to advance on our technology of not just creating the power storage, but being able to shrink it down while it being able to hold a maximum amount of energy that's needed, especially for the application it's needed for. Yet at the same time, you want to be able to have a system that can produce and double the amount of power that is needed to necessarily be stored, in essence, shrunk down as well. So this is just kind of an example. So like my 12 panel system on my house, I got 6 there and 6 up over here. If I could basically shrink that down to where I'm producing enough power off of one panel to power my whole home, and if I wanted to have that excess to charge my systems, then I might need 2 panels. You know where I'm going there? So let's say I want to be efficient enough to produce for not just my home and all that, but to be able to produce for the grid. It would be great if it only took 4 panels. And that's what I'm saying. Having that efficiency of having a system that can be as small as possible to create the maximum amount of energy, or in this case with solar, wind, and all that, to convert the most in maximum amount of energy into usable energy. So that's why I can't help but think that when it comes down to it, when we got to this conversation and all that a little bit, it's just a loose one, I feel like magnetics might actually be where things are at. I mean, whether it's in the social sense or the science sense, or hell, even in, I don't like saying religious sense, because religion is just basically it's a habitual habit or practice that you do on a daily and a constant. So you just getting up every day at the same time, taking a shit at the same time, showering at the same time, brushing your teeth at the same time. You're doing so religiously. It also can reference to your emotion and all that. So, like the old term, losing my religion, it's like losing my temper, you know, that type of thing. But anyways, even in the standpoint of faith-based ideologies, they recognize that there's a magnetism in everything. Things attract. In science, we recognize that magnetics rotates an entire planet and also helps sustain the life on that planet. So why not look into that as being the actual alternative energy to put focus into? Do the same thing with the solar, the wind, and all that, because we need those advancements regardless. Because not everybody's going to necessarily be able to afford certain things, because we know how economics works and all that. Regardless where you live on this planet, you're paying out the ass if you want something really good, or you're going to end up paying at least a nominal fee for something that you know it's at least going to work. But why not? It makes me wonder how much power, and I know we can find it, you know, on YouTube and some of these other channels, you know, and other videos where people have made their magnetic generators on a small scale in their garages and stuff like that. But what about, you know, finding something that's about the size of one of those great big green water tower looking things, not the ones on the stilts, the ones in the ground, you know, they look like almost like a grain silo, but it's for water, the big green tanks, something of that size, and see what that does and what kind of production of power that can do. That would be freaking awesome. Yeah, that would be pretty damn awesome. Talk about taking that superconductor that they were working on to put into like a plane or something and making it big enough to put on like an aircraft carrier and power that. Just to see what it does. I mean, that would be great to see if they could produce one on land that can produce the power output to actually run one of those things. I mean, that's the city on water. And everything on there basically relies on generators to function. So it'd definitely be a better alternative than nuclear. It'd be a better alternative to coal, you know, because some are looking at going back to coal, but you're defeating the purpose of trying to do away with fossil fuels if you go back to coal and go, well, it's okay if we do it for this. Well, no, if we're going to do this, you might as well go all in, and if you're going to go all in, do it right. You don't want to go and start switching things without being ready for the outcome of those situations that could happen, or if it's going to add to current problems or add more problems, you know, that don't need to happen. Because then you're no better than what, you know, a lot of people bitch about every generation. Well, if the other generation before us had just thought about this beforehand, we wouldn't be dealing with it now. But no, I'm at 33 minutes, so there you go. Have a good day, guys. It's just a ramble on this stuff. It was a good conversation, and I hope you guys have a good week. Later.